Hi, I'm Mike, and welcome to this episode of the CDNify podcast. So I'm really excited to announce that today we're joined by Max Lynch. So say hello, Max.
Hello.
Hey, so for those of you who don't know, Max, alongside Ben Sperry, is the co-founder of Drifty, and they're the company behind products like Jetpack, Codica, and most recently the cross-platform framework Ionic. So, Max, for people that don't know, can you give us a bit of background about Drifty and the products that you make?
Sure. So we have been around for about 2.5 years. Basically started a company trying to make simple visual development tools, so you didn't have to code, but you could still create mobile apps, mobile websites, responsive websites, things like that. So we started by building our first tool, Codica, for jQuery mobile developers. We saw jQuery mobile was getting popular, and we kind of realized, like, if jQuery mobile is going to be really popular, like, it needs tools for developers to build with it, which has historically kind of been the case with other successful UI libraries like Visual Basic. So we basically built these tools, released them on the web, got a ton of support from the community, and we're able to bootstrap our company just based around this simple concept of visual development tools. We ended up kind of tweaking the company later, like 1.5 years later, to what we're doing now with the Ionic framework, which I can talk more about later.
Yeah. So actually, touching on Ionic, recently you raised $1 million in funding, which I can imagine it's quite an exciting thing because it's going to allow you to grow and continue to develop the framework. So could you kind of talk to us about what that journey was like?
Sure. So like I said, we were building these visual development tools for other frameworks. And one of them was jQuery Mobile, and we really, really liked jQuery Mobile, but we felt like we kind of saw a different future where, you know, some of the most powerful phones were finally capable of providing like native feeling experiences using only web technologies. And jQuery Mobile's values were kind of more on like running on every single device, which is totally awesome. Like it's great for mobile websites, but we really wanted something that was going to shine on higher end phones.
Yeah.
And also have more of like a native app feel. So there's just some things you can't do in the mobile browser that you can do in like a Cordova like native container, things like side menu swiping, because the mobile browser like overrides that. So there's just some differences with jQuery Mobile that we saw, and we decided that we needed to build our own framework, and that there was kind of a gap in the market where there was no real open source, like permissively open source framework for building native apps with only web technologies.
Yeah.
And we decided that we'd be the right team to build it. So about less than a year ago, actually, we started working on what became Ionic, which we ended up releasing at the end of November 2013.
Okay, and I'm guessing the uptake of it's been quite big. Yeah.
So after we released it, it kind of just took off.
Yeah.
And became the most successful thing we had ever done, just in terms of, you know, traffic to the website, Twitter followers, people using it. I mean, we weren't charging for it, so it was a little different product for us.
Yeah.
So it just kind of took off, and we realized, like, hey, we've got something that could potentially be huge on our hands, something with a more like broad business, not just focusing on like prototyping tools, which is kind of what we had done in the past, but something that was going to let us be a leader in hybrid development and have services and tools for like every part of the development process. And Ionic was kind of like the way to build that foundation so we could have this kind of comprehensive offering and really build a big business.
So was it before you launched Ionic that you were thinking about, okay, maybe we'll go and get funding for this, or was it something that kind of came about afterwards?
It came about afterwards. So actually the moment that kind of pushed us over the edge, so to speak, was I got invited to speak at the first ever AngularJS conference in January, and I was kind of just added on to the beginning of the conference and gave like a hack night presentation and about Ionic, and it was really, really well received. And then throughout the rest of the conference, like just randomly, Ionic was brought up like several times.
Yeah.
It seemed like everything related to mobile, like we were being mentioned. So
That's good.
we just were kind of like realizing like, wow, this thing is kind of like really, really taking off. And, you know, it's open source. Like we can't charge for it. We shouldn't charge for it. We should just be getting everyone to use it. So we realized like, you know, maybe we should go and put some money in the bank and kind of really grow this thing. And just kind of focus on making the framework awesome, which wasn't going to make us money for a while.
Yeah, of course.
So that's why we did end up deciding to raise some money.
Okay, yeah. So I guess over the last few years, there's been a bit of an explosion of frameworks. Now, can you tell us like what is it that Ionic can really enable me to do that other frameworks can't?
Well, it's really like a comprehensive like solution. There's a lot of frameworks that kind of just give you one little piece, and they're really not that compelling over the long term. Where something like Ionic has the user interface, it's got, you know, a good design, it's got tools for building with it, it's got support to help you build it, and then now like something that kind of just gives it a bigger advantage is it has a real community behind it. So you can go to our forum. We've got thousands of people on the forum. Tons of people are getting help. I mean, that's some of the, you know, more like softer sides of the framework. I mean, the framework itself is high quality. It's well written. It's well tested. You know, it's going to be well supported for years and years. So that's really kind of the big difference between us and other frameworks.
Yeah. So I guess if I'm a developer and I'm looking to start a project and I'm kind of not sure which framework to use, why am I going to pick Ionic over, you know, what else is out there? How does it differ from things like Kendo and Sencha?
So Kendo and Sencha are great. I think something that separates Ionic from those two is we are heavily focused on Angular. So if you're using Angular to build a mobile app, which we think is a great idea, it's really, really good for mobile development, particularly because you don't really have to worry about search engine optimization. And you have tons of tools to quickly build apps. So Ionic is like heavily built on Angular. Kendo has some Angular support. It's not as deeply integrated as ours is. Yeah. The licensing is more friendly. So Sencha and Kendo, I think Kendo's changed their licensing recently, but Sencha's GPL. GPL/commercials. So if you want to use it and actually like release an app and not release your own code, you have to buy the commercial license. The GPL is just kind of for open source projects where you're going to release your own code. So that doesn't really make sense for most developers, and GPL isn't a popular license for frameworks. So, I mean, and Sencha has their own, you know, EXTJS, which is, you know, a proprietary you know, custom framework that has a small community, whereas Angular is gigantic. And then, we've just kind of focused on, you know, more animations and more native feeling user interface elements that those frameworks kind of haven't added. Okay.
So I recently read that there's something like 200 apps being created every day on Ionic.
Yeah, it's like more like 400 to 500 every day.
Wow.
There's been, I was just looking at the stats yesterday. There's been like 26,000 apps that have been created just this year alone in the last like 5 months. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So what are kind of some of the more interesting things that have been created that stand out to you?
So one of our favorites is there's a company called Keychain Logistics. They're in San Francisco. They do like basically call themselves like Uber for truckers. And they have a really, really great app. We've worked with them just to, you know, basically change their native apps to Ionic. Okay. They're really happy with it. There's some other ones, like there's a company called Habit RPG, which does this fun thing like, you know, gamifies your life to like instill good habits. So they love Ionic. They said like when they released Ionic, they went from like 2 stars in the App Store to like, you know, 4+. So they're really happy with it. We've got Salesforce is another company using Ionic for some of their developer force. demos and stuff, and they've been kind of increasing that, which we're really excited about. We've got a showcase page with there's been 90 apps submitted so far, and that's showcase.ionicframework.com.
Cool.
And yeah.
Okay, so I guess there's going to be a lot of advantages for me in terms of development. It's going to speed up the time that I'm spending developing. But what are kind of some of the performance benefits to using Ionic?
So we spent a ton of time optimizing all of our animations, all of our gesture-based interactions, like swiping side menus, scrolling, slide box things. We don't really use jQuery. We don't use it at all for the framework. So we avoid layout thrashing. We're very, very particular about how we update the page, so we avoid common performance pitfalls.
Yeah.
We've got a test suite and now a visual test suite that will show us when things have kind of regressed visually. So we can monitor and say, hey, this thing's it's slowing down. It doesn't look right. So we're definitely being rigorous about making sure it's fast and making sure it's fast on all platforms, not just iOS.
Yeah. Okay. So kind of going back to kind of what we were talking about before about bootstrapping and funding, having done both of those routes, do you have a preference for either, or does it really kind of depend on the project for you?
I really don't think they're any different. And I kind of changed my opinion on this. I used to see the world as kind of you're either bootstrapping or you're a funded company. I think you have to bootstrap these days. You don't have a choice, because the competition for funding has gotten to the point where unless you're a well-known founder and you've been doing this for a while and you have a reputation, no one's going to give you $1 million unless you've proven that you can build something.
Yeah.
So you almost have to take the time and bootstrap in order to actually get funding if you want it. So they're very similar. I think what bootstrapping gives you is just the ability to make money from software and be self-sufficient. Something that is always going to be valuable, whether you have funding or not. And we still act like a bootstrap company. We try to do a lot of our own creation stuff in-house,
yeah.
Whether that's software, media, marketing. We don't really outsource anything.
Cool.
We try to have all those skill sets on the team,
yeah.
Even if we have to just pick it up as we go.
Yeah.
But I mean, fundraising, it helps because you can stop worrying so much about money.
Yeah.
And I kind of realized in the startup world, profit's a little bit overrated. And I think that's one thing I disagree with the bootstrap world is profit's great, but it's usually not enough to be meaningful, as meaningful as say an exit or an IPO would be.
Yeah.
So I've kind of changed my opinion on profits, I guess.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so you're kind of a bit essentially saying it's, bootstrapping's really the best way to understand if you're ever going to go to that point where you're going to go and get funding and raise a seed round or something like that. Bootstrapping's a brilliant way to get to that kind of point where you have the experience to even go and do that.
Right, and I will say there's some companies that bootstrap and then their product takes off, they're making lots of money, they don't need to fundraise. Those are awesome, and I think we were kind of at the cusp of that. And when we raised money, we weren't we didn't need it, but we kind of saw our business was going to change. And so we just felt like having the money in the bank was going to help us. But by all means, if you're, raking in the cash, don't raise money, don't sell part of the company for no reason.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess in that case, it kind of depends on who the investors are as well and whether they're a good fit for the product.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So to kind of wrap things up, can you tell us what's next for Drifty and Ionic in general?
Yeah, so we've got a ton of interesting tools and services coming. So this is kind of the second half of our plan, which is, we've got the framework. we're working on it. We've hired, a bunch of people to just focus on that. And now we're starting to build out this suite of backend services and tools that make, your Ionic development experience just really, really great. So you'll have, one stack of, any kind of mobile development service you need, like analytics and testing tools, really, really tightly integrated in the framework. It's going to be a lot of fun to use. We've got coming out soon, which we're just going to be announcing this week, at least the beta landing page, is what we're calling the Ionic Creator, which is a little bit of so this is the first time I'm really talking about it.
Cool, okay.
So the Ionic Creator is kind of a little nod to our history of building drag and drop tools, but for Ionic. So we've got a really simple, fast, easy to use drag and drop tool for building, for mocking up and prototyping Ionic user interfaces.
Cool.
That is really fun to use. It'll be out in probably a month or so, but we're going to put up a beta sign up this week. Cool. And send it out in our newsletter.
Okay, so that's going to open up the kind of audience, essentially.
Yeah, our history of building these tools kind of taught us that they appeal to a different type of developer in the community, and they're really, really valuable. I think one mistake we made in the past was just trying to build the business around just that tool, when in reality it needs to be a small part of something bigger. So that's our mindset has kind of changed on it, but we love building them. People love using them. They're really fun. So
cool. Okay, well that sounds really interesting. So you said that you're going to be putting a beta page up for that this week.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. Well, what we'll do is below the podcast on our blog, we'll include the link to that and to the other links that you've mentioned throughout the podcast. And yeah, well, thanks very much for joining me today. It sounds really interesting what you guys are up to, and it'll be exciting to see kind of what happens in the next stage of Ionic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Thank you.